The moment my daughter-in-law's hand struck my face, I knew the woman I once called family was gone, but she had no idea that her slap would set into motion the kind of payback she would never forget. The sting burned across my cheek as I stood there in my son's living room at 9:30 in the evening, watching her smug expression while my own child remained silent. $50,000, she'd demanded, for a honeymoon cruise, as if I were her personal ATM. "Get out!" she hissed, her manicured finger pointing toward the door. "And don't come back until you learn some respect." I gathered what was left of my dignity, picked up my purse, and walked toward that door. But with each step, something cold and calculating began to crystallize in my chest. She wanted to play games. Fine. I'd been underestimated before. And I was about to show her exactly how dangerous that could be. My name is Rachel Hartman, and 38 years of living had taught me that life could strip you bare in ways you never imagined. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for this moment. The evening had started innocently enough. I'd been staying in my son Ethan's spare bedroom for 3 weeks now, ever since my divorce finalized and my job at the marketing firm evaporated in the same month. The walls of that small room had become my entire world, decorated with cardboard boxes containing the remnants of a life I'd spent 2 decades building. Ethan had married Sabrina 6 months ago, and I'd tried so hard to love her. Really, I had. But Sabrina was the kind of woman who measured worth in dollar signs and saw kindness as weakness. At 25, she possessed the sort of calculated ambition that made my skin crawl, wrapped in designer clothes that cost more than most people's rent. "We need to talk," she'd announced when I emerged from my room around 8:30 that evening, looking for a cup of tea. She was perched on their leather sectional like a queen holding court, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the late hour. Ethan sat beside her, his 23-year-old face wearing that expression I'd learned to dread, the one that meant he was about to choose his wife over his mother again. "Of course," I'd said, settling into the armchair across from them. "What's on your mind?" Sabrina's lips curved into what she probably thought was a smile, but her eyes remained ice cold. "Ethan and I have been discussing our future, and we've decided it's time for you to contribute more to this household." The word contribute hit me like a physical blow. I was already paying them $400 a month for the privilege of sleeping in their spare room, money that came from the rapidly dwindling savings account my lawyer had fought to protect during the divorce. "I'm not sure I understand," I said carefully. "Well, we want to take a honeymoon cruise," Ethan said, finally finding his voice. "We never got to have a proper one because of the wedding expenses and, well, everything that happened with you moving in." Everything that happened, as if my entire life falling apart was merely an inconvenience to their newlywed bliss. "That sounds wonderful," I managed. "I hope you two have a beautiful time." Sabrina's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "Oh, we will, especially since you're going to pay for it." The room went silent except for the hum of their expensive refrigerator in the kitchen. I felt my mouth go dry. "I'm sorry, what?" $50,000, Sabrina said, examining her nails with practiced indifference. "It's a 3-week Mediterranean cruise, first-class accommodations. We've already picked out the suite." $50,000. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. That was more than half of everything I had left in the world. "Sabrina, I can't." "Can't." She leaned forward, and for the first time that evening, her mask slipped completely. "Let me tell you what you can't do, Rachel. You can't continue living here rent-free, eating our food, using our utilities, and contributing nothing to this family." "I pay you $400 a month," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Pocket change," she snapped. "Do you know what apartments go for in this neighborhood? What it costs to maintain a house like this? Ethan works 60 hours a week to support us while you sit in that room feeling sorry for yourself." I looked at my son, this boy I'd raised alone after his father walked out when he was 7. This child I'd worked 3 jobs to put through college. whose every need I'd prioritized over my own for 16 years. "Ethan," I said quietly, "you know I would help if I could, but that money, it's all I have. It has to last until I find another job." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mom, you've been looking for 3 months. Maybe it's time to accept that you need to make some sacrifices. Sabrina and I are young. We deserve to enjoy our lives." The betrayal hit me harder than any physical blow could have. This wasn't my son speaking. This was Sabrina's voice coming out of his mouth. "I understand you want to travel," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "But I can't give you $50,000. I just can't." That's when Sabrina stood up, in her 6-inch heels. She towered over me like some designer-clad avenging angel. Her face had transformed into something ugly and cruel. "You selfish bitch," she hissed. And then her hand connected with my cheek. The slap echoed through the room like a gunshot. My face exploded in heat and pain, but it was nothing compared to the devastation in my chest when I looked at Ethan and saw him do absolutely nothing. "Pack your things," Sabrina said, her voice deadly calm. "I want you out of my house. Tonight." "Sabrina," Ethan started, but she cut him off with a look. "No, Ethan, I'm done. Your mother has shown her true colors. She'd rather hoard her money than help her own family. Well, fine. She can hoard it somewhere else." I touched my burning cheek and looked at my son one last time. "Ethan." He stared at the floor. "Maybe, Mom. Maybe it would be better if you found your own place. We're trying to start our lives together, and this situation isn't working for anyone." Something died inside me at that moment. Not Broke died. 23 years of unconditional love, sacrifice, and devotion, and this was what I got in return. "I'll pack my things," I said, standing on unsteady legs. As I walked toward what had been my temporary sanctuary, I heard Sabrina's voice behind me, sweet as poison, and "Rachel, next time you want to be part of this family, remember that love requires investment." It took me 47 minutes to pack my entire life into 4 suitcases and 3 cardboard boxes. 20 years of marriage, 18 years of motherhood, reduced to what could fit in the back of my 10-year-old Honda Pilot. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd bought that SUV to haul Ethan's belongings to college. Now it was carrying the wreckage of everything I'd built since. By 11:15 that night, I was sitting in the Walmart parking lot on Morse Road, staring at my phone screen. The contact list felt like a graveyard of relationships Sabrina had systematically poisoned over the past 6 months. She'd been so clever about it, so subtle. A comment here about how my friend Linda was probably just using me for emotional support. A suggestion there that my sister in Toledo was too busy with her own problems to really care about mine. Gradually, she'd convinced me that reaching out was selfish, that I was becoming a burden to everyone I loved. And like a fool, I'd believed her. I scrolled through the names anyway. Linda Martinez, we'd been friends since high school, but I hadn't called her in 4 months. The last time we'd spoken, she'd invited me to her daughter's graduation party, and Sabrina had convinced me it would be awkward since I was going through such a difficult time. "People don't want to be around negativity," she'd said with that sympathetic smile that never reached her eyes. My finger hovered over Linda's number, then moved on. What would I say? "Hi, I know I've been a terrible friend, but my son's wife just slapped me and threw me out of their house, and I need somewhere to sleep." I tried my sister Janet next, got as far as pressing her contact info, then hung up before it could ring. Janet had 3 kids and a husband who'd been laid off 2 months ago. The last thing she needed was her disaster of a sister showing up on her doorstep. The parking lot was nearly empty except for a few late-shift workers heading to their cars. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh, unforgiving white. I'd never felt so completely alone in my life. Around midnight, a security guard knocked on my window. He was young, maybe Ethan's age, with kind eyes that reminded me painfully of my son before Sabrina got her claws into him. "Ma'am, you okay in there?" I rolled down the window, trying to compose myself. I'm fine, just making some phone calls. He glanced at the boxes visible in my back seat, then back at my face. I wondered if he could see the handprint Sabrina had left on my cheek. Store policy says no overnight parking. There's a 24-hour diner about 2 miles down the road if you need somewhere to sit for a while. Of course, I said, my voice cracking slightly. Thank you. The diner was called Mel's, one of those chrome and vinyl relics from the 1950s that somehow still survived in the age of Starbucks and Panera. I ordered coffee and pie I couldn't afford and sat in a corner booth, watching the clock above the cash register tick past 1:30 in the morning. The waitress was a woman about my age with tired eyes and comfortable shoes. She refilled my cup without being asked and eventually slid into the seat across from me. Rough night, she asked quietly. I almost broke down right there. Almost told this stranger everything about the slap, about Ethan's betrayal, about the fact that I had nowhere to go and no one to call. Instead, I just nodded. Been there, she said simply. Life has a way of kicking you when you're down. But honey, sometimes that's when you find out what you're really made of. By 3 in the morning, I was back in my SUV, this time in the parking lot of a 24-hour Planet Fitness. I'd signed up for a membership years ago and forgotten to cancel at $15 a month. I'd cursed every time it hit my bank account. Now it felt like a lifeline. At least I'd have somewhere to shower. I pushed the driver's seat back as far as it would go and tried to get comfortable. The temperature had dropped into the 40s, and even with a blanket from one of my boxes, I was shivering. Every sound made me jump a car door slamming. Footsteps on pavement, the distant wail of a siren. I'd never realized how vulnerable you could feel when your car was your only shelter. Sleep came in fractured pieces. I'd doze for 20 minutes, then wake with my neck cramped and my heart racing from some half-remembered nightmare. By dawn, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. The Planet Fitness opened at 5, and I was their first customer. The teenage girl at the front desk looked at me with curiosity but didn't ask questions when I headed straight for the showers with a gym bag hastily packed with toiletries and clean clothes. Standing under the hot water, I finally let myself cry. Not the dignified tears of grief I'd shed during my divorce, but ugly, body-racking sobs that echoed off the tile walls. I cried for the son I'd lost, for the family I'd never really had, for the life I'd worked so hard to build that had crumbled in a single evening. When I finally emerged, red-eyed and hollow, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. 48 hours ago, I'd been a woman temporarily down on her luck. Now I looked like what I was: homeless, friendless, with nowhere to go and no one who cared. But as I stared at my reflection, something shifted. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was the first stirring of something that had been buried under years of other people's expectations. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about what Sabrina would say, or how Ethan might react, or whether I was being too much trouble for someone else. I was thinking about survival, and for reasons I couldn't quite explain yet, that felt like the beginning of something. I drove aimlessly for 2 hours that morning, my hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. The suburbs of Columbus gave way to farmland, then to small towns I'd never bothered to notice during my old life. Somewhere around 10:30, I found myself on Route 2 heading toward Lake Erie without any conscious decision to go there. The lake had always been my escape during high school, when my parents fought, when boys broke my heart. When the future seemed too overwhelming to face, I'd drive the hour and a half from Columbus to the water and sit on the rocky shore until the world made sense again. I hadn't been back in almost 20 years. The November air was crisp and sharp when I finally parked at Edgewater Marina, carrying the scent of winter and dying leaves. Most of the pleasure boats had been pulled from the water for the season, but the commercial docks were still busy with tour boats and fishing charters preparing for their final runs before the lake froze. I walked to the end of the longest pier, my breath forming small clouds in the cold air. The water stretched endlessly toward the horizon, gray-green and choppy under the overcast sky. For the first time in weeks, I could actually breathe. Rachel Morrison. I turned to find a man walking toward me, and my heart nearly stopped. Even after 23 years, I would have recognized Noah Fletcher anywhere. He was taller than I remembered, his dark hair now silver at the temples, his face weathered by years of sun and wind. But those eyes, those impossibly blue eyes that had once made me forget my own name, were exactly the same. "It's Hartman now," I said automatically, then felt foolish. "Well, it was Hartman. Now I guess it's back to Morrison." He stopped a few feet away, studying my face with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I heard about the divorce. I'm sorry." Of course he'd heard. In a state like Ohio, everyone eventually knew everyone else's business, especially if you'd grown up in the same small circles we had. "It's fine," I lied, then realized how ridiculous that sounded given my obvious circumstances. "Actually, no, it's not fine at all. My life is completely falling apart." Noah's expression softened. "Want to talk about it? I was just heading to lunch anyway. There's a decent place about 5 minutes from here." I should have said no. Should have made polite excuses and walked away before I could embarrass myself further. Instead, I found myself nodding. The restaurant was a small seafood place overlooking the marina, the kind of local spot that tourists never found. Noah ordered for both of us fish and chips with coffee while I tried to figure out what to say to the boy who'd been my first love, my first everything, before I'd left for college and never looked back. "So," he said when the waitress left, "what brings you to the lake besides divine intervention? Apparently—" I laughed despite myself. Divine intervention. "Wow, well, running into your high school girlfriend in the exact spot where you first kissed her after 23 years of no contact, either divine intervention or the universe has a seriously twisted sense of humor." The memory hit me like a physical blow. I was 17 again, standing on that same pier after prom, wearing a blue dress I'd saved for months to buy. Noah had been so nervous he'd almost dropped the corsage, and when he finally kissed me, I'd thought my life was just beginning. "I remember," I said softly. "Good. For a minute there. I thought maybe I'd imagined the whole thing." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You look tired, Rachel. Really tired." Something about the way he said it, not judgmental, just concerned, broke down the last of my defenses. The whole story came pouring out. The divorce, the job loss, moving in with Ethan, Sabrina's increasing hostility, the demand for $50,000, the slap, sleeping in my car. All of it. Noah listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "That's quite a story," he said finally. "I know how it sounds, like I'm just some pathetic middle-aged woman who can't get her life together." "That's not how it sounds at all." His voice was firm. "It sounds like you've been systematically abused and isolated by someone who saw you as a threat." The word abused hit me like cold water. I don't think... Rachel, what that woman did to you, the manipulation, the isolation, the financial coercion, the physical violence that's textbook abuse, the fact that she got your own son to participate makes it worse, not better. I felt tears threatening again and blinked them back. "It doesn't matter now. It's done." "Is it?" Noah signaled the waitress for more coffee. "Tell me, what are you planning to do now?" "I don't know. Find an apartment, I guess. Look for work. Try to rebuild." "With what money you said yourself you're running through your savings?" The bluntness of the question stung because it was exactly what I'd been trying not to think about. "I'll figure something out." Noah was quiet for a moment, then leaned forward. "I have a proposition for you." "Noah, hear me out. I own a yacht charter company now, Fletcher Maritime. We do luxury tours, corporate events, private parties. The business has grown faster than I expected, and I'm drowning in the administrative side. I need someone to handle customer service, coordinate with the kitchen staff, manage bookings, someone with experience in hospitality. I stared at him. I don't know anything about boats. You know people. You spent 15 years managing restaurant operations before you moved into marketing, right? This isn't that different, and I can teach you everything else. Noah, I can't just... The job comes with housing. There's an apartment above the office that's been sitting empty for months. Nothing fancy, but it's clean and warm and private. The pay is decent, not amazing, but enough to get back on your feet. I felt like I was drowning. It was too much, too fast, too good to be true. Why, I asked, why would you offer this to someone you haven't seen in over 20 years? Noah smiled, and for a moment he looked exactly like the 18-year-old boy who'd promised to write every day when I left for college. Because 23 years ago, you were the best person I knew. Smart, kind, determined, loyal to a fault. I'm betting that person is still in there somewhere, even if life has beaten her down pretty badly. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. Besides, maybe the universe brought you here for a reason. Maybe it's time for both of us to get a second chance. The apartment above Fletcher Maritime's office was nothing like the suburban home I'd shared with my ex-husband, or even the spare bedroom at Ethan's house. It was small, just a studio with a kitchenette, a Murphy bed, and windows that looked out over the marina. But it was mine. For the first time in months, I had a space where no one could tell me I didn't belong. Noah helped me carry my boxes up the narrow stairs that first afternoon, pretending not to notice when I had to stop twice to catch my breath. Everything I owned fit easily into the single closet and a small dresser that came with the furnished space. Training starts Monday at 7 in the morning, he said, setting down the last box. I know it's early, but most of our clientele are early risers. Successful people tend to be. Monday came faster than I expected. I woke at 5:30, my stomach churning with a mixture of excitement and terror I hadn't felt since my first day of college. The face looking back at me in the bathroom mirror was still pale and hollow-eyed, but there was something different there now. Hope, maybe, or just the stubborn determination that had gotten me through single motherhood and a difficult marriage. The Fletcher Maritime office was a converted boathouse with exposed beams and windows that ran floor to ceiling along the waterside. Noah was already there when I arrived, standing over a desk covered with charts and booking calendars, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. "Ready for this?" he asked, looking up with a smile that reminded me why I'd fallen so hard for him in high school. The first week was overwhelming. Noah threw information at me like he was trying to fill a swimming pool with a fire hose. I learned about tides and weather patterns, about the difference between a motor yacht and a sailing yacht, about wine pairings and dietary restrictions and how to handle seasickness without making other passengers uncomfortable. Our average client spends between $5,000 and $15,000 for a day charter, Noah explained as we walked the docks on Wednesday morning. They're not just buying a boat ride, they're buying an experience. They want to feel pampered, special, like they're living in a movie for a few hours. I took notes frantically, trying to absorb everything. The boats were beautiful, sleek white vessels with names like Second Wind and Destiny's Call that looked like something out of a magazine. The largest, Ocean's Dream, was Noah's pride and joy, a 70-foot yacht that could accommodate up to 12 passengers in luxury that rivaled any five-star hotel. "This is where the magic happens," he said, leading me aboard. The interior was stunning polished wood, leather seating, a galley kitchen that would make any restaurant chef jealous. Full bar, surround sound, satellite internet. We've hosted everything from marriage proposals to corporate board meetings. By the end of my second week, I was handling phone inquiries and learning to read Noah's booking system. The work was demanding but satisfying in a way my old marketing job had never been. Each client was different, each charter a unique puzzle to solve. A pharmaceutical company wanted team-building activities and healthy catering. A couple celebrating their 50th anniversary needed wheelchair accessibility and a quiet spot for him to take his afternoon medications. A tech startup wanted to impress potential investors with an experience they'd never forget. You're a natural at this, Noah said on Friday evening as we locked up the office. Mrs. Peterson called this afternoon to rave about how well you handled her daughter's bachelorette party. I felt a flush of pride that surprised me with its intensity. She was easy to work with. She knew exactly what she wanted. Trust me, they're not all like that. Noah paused at the bottom of the stairs leading to my apartment. Hey, would you like to grab dinner? There's a place in town that does amazing Italian food. I hesitated. The line between professional and personal had been blurring more each day, and I wasn't sure I was ready for the complications that might bring. But the thought of spending another evening alone in my small apartment, eating frozen dinners and trying not to think about Ethan and Sabrina, was too depressing to contemplate. I'd like that, I said. The restaurant was small and intimate, with checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in wine bottles. Noah ordered a bottle of Chianti and insisted I try the seafood risotto. You look different, he said as we waited for our food. Better. More like the girl I remember. I touched my hair self-consciously. I'd been taking more care with my appearance lately, styling my hair instead of just pulling it back, wearing makeup again, choosing clothes that fit properly instead of whatever was clean and convenient. I feel different, I admitted. Stronger. Maybe. More like myself than I have in years. What was he like, your ex-husband? The question caught me off guard. David. He was safe, predictable. He had a good job, came from a good family. My parents loved him. But did you love him? I considered the question, twirling pasta around my fork. I thought I did. Or maybe I loved the idea of him, the security he represented. I was so tired of struggling, of being a single mother, of never knowing if I could pay all the bills. David offered stability. And now? Now I realize that staying safe isn't the same thing as being alive. I met his eyes across the table. I spent 20 years building a life that wasn't really mine, making choices based on what other people expected, what would cause the least trouble, what looked right from the outside. Noah reached across the table and took my hand, just like he had that day at lunch, but this time, I didn't pull away. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I think the real you is pretty spectacular. Walking back to the marina under a canopy of stars, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, contentment. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but a deep sense that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, the woman who had cowered in Ethan's spare bedroom, who had let Sabrina manipulate and isolate her, felt like someone from another lifetime. As we reached the office, Noah turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Rachel, there's something I should probably tell you about the business. My stomach dropped. What is it? We're not just a charter company. We're actually doing better than I let on. A lot better. Fletcher Maritime has contracts with some of the biggest companies in Ohio. We're booked solid through next summer, and I'm looking at expanding the fleet. I stared at him. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to think I was offering you charity. You needed to know you could do this job, that you belonged here. And you do. Rachel. You absolutely do. As I climbed the stairs to my apartment that night, I caught my reflection in the window and had to stop. The woman looking back at me had clear eyes and straight shoulders. She looked competent, confident, like someone who could handle whatever life threw at her. She looked like someone who might actually be capable of fighting back. It was a Tuesday morning in late March when everything changed. I was reviewing the weekend's booking confirmations, cross-referencing dietary restrictions with our catering partner, when a familiar name jumped out from the screen like a slap across the face. Hartman, E&S, Mediterranean Luxury Package, Ocean's Dream, Departure, April 15th, Duration, 3 days, 2 nights. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the details. Premium suite accommodation, full catering service, champagne welcome package, total cost $48,700. $48,000. just shy of the $50,000 Sabrina had demanded from me that night in their living room. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred together, my heart hammering against my ribs. They had found the money after all. Somehow, they had scraped together nearly $50,000 for their dream honeymoon cruise, the same cruise they had demanded I pay for, the same amount they claimed they desperately needed from me. "Everything okay?" Noah's voice made me jump. He was standing in the doorway of my office, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the concerned expression that had become so familiar over the past 4 months. "Fine," I managed, minimizing the screen. "Just reviewing bookings." But Noah knew me too well by now. He set the coffee cups down and moved around my desk to look at the monitor. When he saw the booking details, his expression darkened. "Jesus, Rachel, are you kidding me?" "It's fine," I said quickly. "It's just business. They're customers like anyone else." Customers like anyone else." Noah's voice rose slightly. "These are the people who threw you out on the street, who slapped you and humiliated you and convinced you that you were worthless." "I know what they did." The words came out sharper than I intended. "But this is my job. I can handle it professionally." Noah studied my face for a long moment, then sat down in the chair across from my desk. "You know what I think?" "I'm sure you're going to tell me." "I think this is exactly what you've been waiting for, whether you want to admit it or not." His words hit me like cold water. I started to protest, but he held up his hand. "Rachel, I've watched you transform over the past 4 months. You've gone from a broken woman sleeping in her car to someone who commands respect from millionaire clients. You've learned this business inside and out. You've become indispensable." He leaned forward, his blue eyes intense. "But there's been something missing. Some part of you that's still afraid, still playing small, still letting them win." "I'm not—" "When was the last time you called Ethan?" The question stopped me cold. The truth was, I hadn't spoken to my son since that night in his living room. I'd thought about calling him dozens of times, had started to dial his number more than once, but something always stopped me. Pride, maybe, or fear that he would hang up on me. "That's what I thought." Noah's voice was gentler now. "They took everything from you, Rachel, your home, your relationship with your son, your sense of self-worth, and you've built yourself back up from nothing, but until you face them, until you show them who you've become, they'll always have that power over you." I stared at the booking screen, my mind racing. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that you handle their charter personally. Full VIP treatment. Let them see exactly what they threw away." The idea was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. "Noah, I can't. What if I lose my temper? What if I say something unprofessional?" "Then you deal with the consequences." "But Rachel, you've been dancing around this for months. You're never going to be completely free until you face them from a position of strength." That evening, I sat in my apartment staring at my phone. Noah's words echoed in my head, mixing with memories of that awful night. Sabrina's satisfied smirk, Ethan's refusal to meet my eyes, the sound of my belongings being packed into boxes. Around 9:30, I made a decision. I called the number listed in Ethan's booking file. "Hello." His voice was exactly the same, and for a moment I was speechless. "Ethan, it's Mom." Silence stretched between us like a chasm. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "Mom, hi. I'm calling about your booking with Fletcher Maritime." "How did you wait? Fletcher Maritime. That's where you work." "I'm the customer service manager." I let that sink in for a moment. "I wanted to personally ensure that your experience exceeds your expectations." More silence. I could almost hear him processing this information, trying to reconcile the homeless woman they'd thrown out with someone who held a management position at a luxury yacht company. "Mom, we didn't know." "Of course you didn't. How could you? It's not like you've called to check on me since you threw me out of your house." "That's not fair. You're the one who—" "Who what?" Ethan, who refused to give your wife $50,000 for a cruise, the same cruise you're apparently taking anyway. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, could picture him running his hand through his hair the way he'd done since he was a little boy when he was caught in a lie. "Where did you get the money?" I asked quietly. That's not really your business anymore." "You're right, it's not. But I wanted you to know that despite everything that happened between us, I'll make sure you and Sabrina receive the absolute best service Fletcher Maritime has to offer. In fact, I'll be personally overseeing your charter." "Mom, maybe that's not such a good idea." "Oh, but it is, sweetheart. You see, I've become very good at my job, very good at making sure our clients have exactly the experience they deserve." I ended the call before he could respond, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and anticipation. In 3 weeks, I would see them again, but this time, I wouldn't be the desperate, broken woman begging for shelter. This time, I would be the one in control. The morning of April 15th dawned clear and bright, with just enough breeze to make the flags at the marina snap smartly against their poles. I stood on the deck of Ocean's Dream at 7:30, watching the crew make final preparations, my reflection caught in the polished chrome railings. The woman looking back at me wore a crisp navy blazer with the Fletcher Maritime logo, her hair styled in a professional chignon, her makeup flawless. She looked competent, authoritative, successful. She looked nothing like the broken woman who had slept in her car 6 months ago. You ready for this?" Noah appeared beside me, carrying a clipboard and wearing his captain's uniform. He'd insisted on handling this charter personally, claiming it was too important to delegate. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, adjusting the small gold nameplate on my lapel that read Rachel Morrison, Guest Services Manager. At 9:15, exactly on schedule, a black town car pulled up to the marina entrance. Through the tinted windows, I caught a glimpse of blonde hair and immediately felt my stomach clench. But I forced myself to remain calm, to breathe deeply, to remember everything I'd learned about projecting confidence under pressure. They emerged from the car like something out of a luxury lifestyle magazine. Sabrina wore white designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her hair perfectly blown out despite the morning breeze. Ethan looked uncomfortable in khakis and a polo shirt that screamed, "Trying too hard," his eyes darting around the marina like he was expecting trouble. They didn't recognize me at first. I stood at the bottom of the gangway with my professional smile in place, flanked by 2 crew members in crisp uniforms, looking every inch the successful businesswoman I'd become. "Mr. and Mrs. Hartman," I said, stepping forward with my hand extended. "Welcome to Fletcher Maritime. I'm Rachel Morrison, your guest services manager." Sabrina took my hand with the practiced smile of someone accustomed to being served, but Ethan went pale as recognition dawned. His eyes widened, taking in my professional appearance, the confident way I carried myself, the obvious respect with which the crew treated me. "Mom," he whispered. "Ms. Morrison will be fine for the duration of your charter," I said smoothly, releasing Sabrina's hand as she finally realized who I was. The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. "What the hell is this?" Sabrina hissed, but I was already turning toward the yacht. "If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your accommodations. We've prepared the Sunset Suite for you, our finest stateroom, normally reserved for our most distinguished guests." I led them aboard with the practiced patter of a seasoned hospitality professional, pointing out the yacht's features as we walked. The main salon with its panoramic windows and leather seating, the formal dining area where they'd take their meals, the upper deck with its hot tub and bar service. "Your suite is located on the main deck for easy access to all amenities," I continued, opening the door to their stateroom. It was stunning, a king-size bed with Egyptian cotton linens, a sitting area with floor-to-ceiling windows, a marble bathroom with a rainfall shower. Champagne service will begin at 10:30, and lunch will be served at 12:30 on the upper deck. Sabrina stood in the middle of the room, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. This is some kind of joke, right? I can assure you that Fletcher Maritime takes our guests' comfort very seriously, I replied. Is there anything about the accommodations that doesn't meet your expectations? You know damn well what I mean, she snapped, her careful composure finally cracking. What are you doing here? How are you? Working, I said simply. Something I've been doing quite successfully since you threw me out of your house. I turned to Ethan, who was still staring at me like I was a ghost. I trust everything meets with your approval. He nodded mutely, and I could see him trying to process this new version of me, confident, professional, clearly thriving. This wasn't the desperate woman who had begged them for understanding. This wasn't someone who could be dismissed or discarded. Excellent. The crew will take care of your luggage. Please feel free to explore the yacht and familiarize yourselves with the amenities. If you need anything at all, simply press the call button in your suite and someone will assist you immediately. I started to leave, then paused at the doorway. Oh, and Mrs. Hartman, I took the liberty of upgrading your package to include our premium service level. No additional charge, of course. I wanted to ensure you received exactly the treatment you deserve. The emphasis on the last word wasn't lost on either of them. Sabrina's face had gone from pale to flushed red, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head as she tried to figure out how to regain control of the situation. As I walked back toward the main salon, I heard raised voices from their suite, Sabrina's shrill tones and Ethan's quieter, defensive responses. The sounds followed me up to the bridge, where Noah was reviewing charts with his first mate. How did it go? He asked quietly. Better than expected, I said, and realized I meant it. The woman I'd been 6 months ago would have been shaking, would have stammered and apologized and tried to make them comfortable. This woman, the woman I'd become, felt nothing but a cold, professional satisfaction. The real test comes later, Noah warned, when they realize you're not going anywhere. From the upper deck, I could see them emerging from their suite, Sabrina gesticulating wildly while Ethan tried to calm her down. They were clearly arguing about me, about what my presence here meant, about how to handle the situation. Let them argue, I thought. Let them stew in their discomfort and confusion. For too long, I'd been the one who was off balance, the one scrambling to please them, to prove my worth. Now they were in my world, playing by my rules. And I was just getting started. The moment that changed everything came during dinner service on the second evening. I was reviewing the next day's itinerary with Noah in the bridge when Marcus, our head server, appeared in the doorway looking flustered. Ms. Morrison, I need to speak with you. There's been an incident in the dining room. My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice steady. What kind of incident? It's Mrs. Hartman. She threw her wine glass at Jenny when the soup course was served late. Jenny's only 19, and she's crying in the galley. Mrs. Hartman is demanding to speak with the manager about our incompetent staff. The familiar rage began building in my chest, the same protective fury I'd felt when Sabrina had first started targeting me. But this time, it wasn't directed at my own helplessness. It was focused like a laser on the woman who had just humiliated a teenage girl for doing her job. Tell Mrs. Hartman I'll be right there, I said, my voice deadly calm. And ask Jenny to clean herself up and meet me in 5 minutes. She's going to want to see this. Noah caught my arm as I headed for the door. Rachel, be careful. Don't do anything that could hurt the business. I looked back at him with a smile that probably would have frightened me 6 months ago. Trust me, I know exactly what I'm doing. The main dining room was eerily quiet when I entered. Other passengers were eating in uncomfortable silence while Sabrina sat at her table like an angry queen, her face flushed with wine and indignation. Ethan looked mortified, his eyes fixed on his untouched plate. I approached their table with measured steps, my hands clasped behind my back in perfect professional posture. I understand there was a problem with your service this evening. Finally, Sabrina snapped, not bothering to look up. Yes, there was a problem. That little girl you have serving us is completely incompetent. First, she brings the wrong wine, then she's late with the soup, and when I pointed out her mistakes, she had the nerve to argue with me. I see. I let the silence stretch for a moment. And your response was to throw your wine glass at her. I didn't throw it at her, Sabrina said, finally meeting my eyes with a defiant glare. I simply expressed my displeasure. If your staff can't handle a little criticism, maybe they should find other jobs. The dining room had gone completely silent now. Even the other passengers had stopped eating to watch this confrontation unfold. I was dimly aware of Jenny hovering near the galley entrance, her eyes red but her chin raised bravely. Mrs. Hartman, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. I'd like to share something with you, and with everyone else here tonight. Sabrina's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? You see, most of our guests don't know that I actually have a personal connection to the Hartman party. Mrs. Hartman here is my former daughter-in-law. A ripple of surprise went through the room. Ethan had gone white as a sheet, and Sabrina was staring at me with growing alarm. 6 months ago, I continued, my voice steady and clear. I was going through a difficult divorce and had lost my job. My son, Mrs. Hartman's husband, kindly allowed me to stay in their spare room while I got back on my feet. I was paying rent, of course, and trying to be as unobtrusive as possible. The other diners were leaning forward now, captivated by this unexpected drama. One evening, Mrs. Hartman demanded that I give her $50,000 to pay for a luxury cruise. When I explained that I couldn't afford such an amount, she struck me across the face and threw me out of their house. That night, I slept in my car in a Walmart parking lot. Gasps echoed around the room. I could see shock and disgust on the faces of the other passengers successful. Wealthy people who understood exactly what kind of person would treat a family member that way. But here's the interesting part, I continued, never taking my eyes off Sabrina's increasingly panicked face. The cruise she demanded I pay for, it was with Fletcher Maritime. This exact cruise. In fact, somehow, despite claiming they desperately needed my money, they managed to afford this $48,000 luxury vacation anyway. Sabrina shot to her feet. You can't. This is completely inappropriate. You're absolutely right, I said smoothly. Which brings me to my main point. You see, Mrs. Hartman, 6 months ago you judged me to be worthless. Someone whose feelings didn't matter, whose dignity was disposable, whose family relationships could be destroyed for your convenience. I gestured around the elegant dining room. But this is my workplace now. These are my colleagues, my staff, my guests, and in this environment, I have something I didn't have in your living room that night. I paused, letting the tension build. Power! Sabrina's face had gone from red to ashen. She looked around the room at the shocked, disapproving faces staring back at her. The young woman you just humiliated is under my protection, I continued. She's 19 years old, working her way through college, and she's one of the most dedicated employees I've ever supervised. Your behavior toward her is absolutely unacceptable. I turned to address the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to personally apologize for this disruption to your evening. The Hartman party will be departing at our next port stop in the morning. Their charter has been terminated. You can't do that, Sabrina shrieked. We paid for this cruise. I'll sue you. You'll what? I asked quietly. Slap me again, throw me out of my own workplace. I smiled. I'm afraid that's not how this works anymore. Mrs. Hartman, you're in my world now. I turned to Marcus, who was watching with barely concealed admiration. Please prepare the Hartman party's final invoice. They'll need to settle their account before disembarking. As I walked toward the galley to check on Jenny, Sabrina's voice followed me, high and desperate. Ethan, do something. Say something. But when I looked back, my son was still sitting in stunned silence, staring at the woman I'd become, and for the first time in 6 months, I saw something in his eyes that had been missing since his wedding day. Respect. The next morning at 8:15, I stood on the dock watching the crew load Ethan and Sabrina's luggage into a taxi. Sabrina sat rigid in the back seat, her designer sunglasses hiding what I imagined were furious tears. She hadn't spoken a word to me since the previous evening's confrontation. Ethan approached me hesitantly, his hands shoved deep in his pockets like the uncertain boy he'd once been. "Mom, He stopped, started again. "Rachel, I need to say something." "You don't owe me anything, Ethan." "Yes, I do." His voice cracked slightly. "I owe you everything, and I threw it all away for someone who—" He glanced back at the taxi where Sabrina was furiously typing on her phone. "Someone who isn't worth your little finger." I studied his face, looking for traces of the sun I'd raised. "Why didn't you stop her that night when she hit me?" He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "Because I was a coward, because she'd convinced me that you were holding us back, that you were just using us, because I believed her when she said you didn't really love me, that you were just trying to control my life. And now? Now I see what she really is, what we both are." He looked down at his hands. "We're broke, Mom. The house is in foreclosure. I lost my job 2 months ago because I couldn't focus, couldn't perform. Sabrina maxed out every credit card we had for this cruise, convinced it would somehow fix everything. The irony was bitter and perfect. The $50,000 you demanded from me. We never had it, she thought. She thought if we could pressure you into giving us the money, we could pay off the worst of the debts and start over. When you refused, she used it as proof that you didn't really care about our happiness." I felt a moment of something that might have been pity, but it passed quickly. "And when you saw the bills for this cruise?" "I tried to cancel it, but Sabrina said we deserved it, that we'd figure out the money later. She convinced me that seeing you fail would somehow make it all worthwhile." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm so ashamed of what I became." A part of me, the mother part that had loved this boy unconditionally for 23 years, wanted to comfort him, to forgive him, to make everything all right. But the woman I'd become, the one who'd clawed her way back from absolute bottom, knew better. "I'm sorry your marriage isn't working out," I said quietly. "I'm sorry you're struggling financially, but those are consequences of choices you made." I know, and I'm not asking you to fix it. He looked up at me with eyes that were suddenly very young. "I just want you to know that I'm proud of what you've become. Seeing you last night, watching you stand up for that girl, seeing how everyone respects you, I remembered who my mother really is." The taxi driver honked impatiently. Sabrina rolled down her window and called out sharply, "Ethan, we're going to miss our flight." "I have to go," he said. "But Mom, Rachel, if you ever decide you can forgive me, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn it." He started toward the taxi, then turned back. "One more thing. The way you handled last night, the way you protected your employee and stood up to Sabrina, that's the mother I remember. That's the woman who taught me right from wrong, even when I forgot how to listen." As the taxi pulled away, I felt Noah's presence beside me. "How do you feel?" he asked. I considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, I would have chased after that taxi, would have offered to help them despite everything they'd done to me. The old Rachel would have prioritized keeping the peace over standing up for what was right. "Free," I said finally, for the first time in years, completely free. Noah smiled and slipped his arm around my waist. "Good, because I have something to ask you." I looked up at him, this man who'd given me a second chance when I'd had nowhere else to turn. "What's that?" "Fletcher Maritime is expanding. We're opening a second location in Miami, and I need someone I trust to run it, someone who understands luxury service and isn't afraid to stand up to difficult clients." My heart began to race. "Noah." "The position comes with a significant salary increase, profit sharing, and a house on the water. Plus, I was thinking Miami might be a nice place for a fresh start, for both of us." I thought about Ethan's words, about forgiveness and second chances. Maybe someday I'd be able to rebuild a relationship with my son. Maybe not. But either way, I was done making decisions based on other people's expectations. "When do we leave?" I asked. His smile was radiant. "How about next week?" As we walked back toward the marina office, I caught my reflection in the window of the harbor master's building. The woman looking back at me had confident shoulders and clear eyes. She looked like someone who'd fought for everything she had and wasn't about to let anyone take it away again. She looked like someone who'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting, even it's becoming so successful, so strong, so unshakably confident that the people who hurt you become irrelevant. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to stay down. Thank you so much for listening to Rachel's story of transformation and triumph. I hope her journey from despair to empowerment resonated with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're listening to this story from. I'd love to connect with listeners from around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts about Rachel's revenge. What would you have done in her situation? I'd love to hear your perspective.